I'm trying. I better hang on. They can probably hear all that. So
Okay, can everyone just make sure their microphones are on mute? Thank you,
let's mute
everybody.
Quick. Where's mute?
So, welcome everybody into our Zoom room to start our meeting.
Why can't I get?
And you're welcome to introduce yourselves into the chat. I'd like to start, as we always do, with an acknowledgement of country. And I would like to acknowledge we are meeting on the unceded lands of First Nations people all over the country and in other parts of the world too. And I pay my deep respects to their elders.
Before, there's usually a little
and emerging. Shelley, could you just look and see who it is that's not on mute? We can mute them.
Come up.
Okay. So just to say again, I pay my deep respects to elders past, present and emerging, and have great gratitude for the custodianship of the land that First Nations people have shown over many millennia. Our theme for this event today is Compassion and Kindness in Government, a gateway to wise action on climate change and other challenges. And we have three wonderful guests to share their knowledge, who I will be introducing you to shortly. But to bring you into the space, I'm going to play a short song written by my friend Johanna McBride, which is called Ubuntu. We are who we are because of each other. It's a beautiful African philosophy that teaches us that we're all interconnected. Nelson Mandela drew on this philosophy for the truth and reconciliation process in South Africa after the end of apartheid. And for the next hour, we'll explore together how to take that deep sense of relationship with each other and the earth into our halls of power to embrace a new style of politics that ultimately pulls us together for the common good. So I'm in the Zoom room here. I have my colleague Shelley Anderson, who is one of the WCC team, and she's going to be helping to get on questions and on the tech in general. And maybe Shelley, you can just keep an eye on that everyone's on mute.
Yes, yeah.
And later on in the Q&A, Shelley's going to help me with the Q&A. So please, as we go along, feel free to put your questions into the chat. So in the Women's Climate Congress commitment statements, we say qualities of the heart, including compassion, love, empathy, and forgiveness, are the basis of true strength and necessary for our survival. These principles are also reflected in our Women's Climate Congress Charter for Change. Now, I've asked Kelly to read Action 6 from the Charter. Kelly, are you okay with that? We can put the spotlight on you.
On me, Janet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could you read us Action 6 from the Charter?
Yes. So Action 6, actions for long-term human and planetary well-being. Elevate compassion and kindness in government. We propose that qualities of the heart, such as compassion, love, kindness, empathy, forgiveness, are the basis of true strength and decision-making. These qualities can be respected, elevated, and applied in government. Qualities of the heart create stronger connections between people, improve collaboration, and increase trust. Such qualities are also associated with the practice of truth, transparency, and integrity, putting the common good ahead of personal gain. Movements elsewhere are promoting a strategic approach to compassion-informed policy as the driver of overall well-being. For example, the Compassion in Politics movement in the UK and the Charter for Compassion Australia. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. And Kelly's put I think, a link to our charter in the chat. And if this is your first contact that you've had with the Women's Climate Congress, I urge you to go and have a look at it there in the full charter, which we created from conversations with thousands of women around Australia. So in the election campaign, Anthony Albanese said that kindness is a strength. This was picked up by the media as being sort of an unusual thing for a politician to say. It wasn't unusual to us. We've been talking about that for a long time, as you can hear. And then earlier this week, Jacinda Ardern was interviewed on the 7:30 report ahead of a publication of hers that's just about, well, I think it has appeared now. It's an autobiographical memoir of her time in New Zealand politics. And she, of course, talks about this as well. So these ideas are out there. They're in the zeitgeist, if you like. So how can we harness this in the newly elected 48th Parliament in Australia and really challenge the status quo, which still favours the notion that strength can be found in adversarial opposition and standover tactics and bullying sometimes? This brings me to our three guest conversationalists for tonight. And we're really delighted to have with us Jennifer Nadel, who's joining us from London, Chloë Spackman, who's based in Sydney, but who's taking time out at the moment on a family holiday in Bali. So we really, really appreciate that she's been able to join us today. And Kate Chaney MP, who's joining us from, she's in transit, I think, on the way back to her electorate in Perth. So the bios of these three wonderful women, all about them, are on our website, and Shelley's just putting the link to that in the chat. But I'll say a little bit more about each one as we bring them into the conversation. So, in fact, Jennifer, I'm going to start with you. Can we have a spotlight on Jennifer, please, Shelley? So, can we have a spotlight on Jennifer? That's great. So Jennifer Nadel FRSA, and that means Fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. And although I'm English and I should know these things, I found myself looking up the RSA today and I found this. Through its extensive network of change makers, thought leadership and projects, the RSA seeks to drive transformative change, enabling people, places and the planet to thrive in harmony. Now that sounds exactly like the Women's Climate Congress, and you, I know, are a wonderful example of this in practice. You're a barrister, a political advisor, and award-winning television journalist. So you've had your fair share of adversarial debate and public discourse along the way, but along the way you've made this transition to become a passionate champion for compassion and empathy. And among many of your initiatives, you've co-founded a cross-party think tank in the UK Parliament called Compassion in Politics. You also have hosted a BBC radio documentary, Broken Politics, Broken Politicians, which explores the impact that our political system has on politicians. So I'd just like you to introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us about particularly the Compassion in Politics movement in the UK, which I think you're planning to bring to Australia as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janet. And it's lovely to be with you all. And I found that moving so powerful because Ubuntu is a word that we often use as a proxy for compassion. It's a recognition of the interconnection of all of us and of all the issues that we face. And our politics at the moment is not working. It's not working because we are facing, for many reasons, inequality and the existential crises that we face as a globe, interlocking, and primarily, of course, climate. And we set up Compassion in Politics really to try and foster a different way of doing politics that embedded compassion at its root. All of the issues that we care about have the same underlying connection, which is if there was sufficient compassion, we would tackle them all. Politics is about choices. We've signed the SDGs, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We know that there are answers, and yet we as a world and our politicians and our leaders have not been able to enact those answers. So what can we change in the way we do politics to enable the answers that do exist to be enacted and support those politicians who are trying to do the right thing? So we look at the adversarial nature of politics, the conflict-based nature. We work a lot with psychologists. Unfortunately, we kindly gifted you the Westminster model of politics, which is based on conflict. It's adversarial, it's binary, it's winner takes all. It promotes competition and tribalism. It doesn't promote the things that we need most right now, which is cooperation and collaboration. So we look at ways to reform that model, and we also look at the policies that come out of it. So we work to try and bring in an intergenerational law which would ensure fairness, which is another way of tackling climate. You know, if we make decisions now, they're going to adversely impact the generations to come. That can't be okay. So we look at how we can embed intergenerational fairness and also a duty to ensure that everyone has what they need to thrive. You know, politics should be about care and concern and trying to ensure that every citizen can thrive. But in our highly polarized political system, and now, of course, we see how vulnerable it is to the rise of the far right. We see how vulnerable it is to disinformation. So I'm sure we'll talk about it later. I don't want to take up too much time at this point. But just to say that that's another area, you know, our democracy is fragile. Trust in politics is at an all-time low. And so this is the moment to try and change politics for good.
Thank you. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm just putting... yes, and we definitely will come and pick up some of those points again in a little while. So I'm going to turn now to Chloë, coming to you next. So Chloë is the CEO of an organisation here in Australia. So Chloë's based in Sydney, usually, I think that's right. And she's the CEO of an organisation called Next 25, which is an independent think and do tank, actually, in Australia, promoting constructive public discourse around challenging issues. Over the past few years, you've been developing a very innovative program for women in Parliament, called Improving Democracy, Transforming Parliament for Women. So I'd like you to tell us a bit about Next 25 generally, and also about this program that you've been running with the Women in Parliament. Over to you, Chloë.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janet. So Next 25 is on a mission to ensure that Australia has what it takes to make the future its people want. And we do this by answering 3 key research questions. So what is the future Australia wants? Are we on track to that future? And if not, what are the deep contributing factors for our underperformance? And what are some levers that we can pull to shift them? And then we build initiatives based on those levers that we've discovered through our research. And our research, so mainly through our Recoded program, uncovered 5 systemic levers, or what we could also call major opportunities to improve Australia's performance towards a long-term flourishing future. And these are a galvanising national identity, benchmarks beyond GDP, constructive discussion, engaged decision-making, and trust in government. And so currently, as Janet mentioned, we're a think and do tank. So the 2 areas that we're working on initiatives in our do tank respond to the trust in government and to the constructive discussion levers. And unsurprisingly, the 2 are very interconnected. So we're working at a systemic level to create the conditions for Australia to have this flourishing future. And in our do tank, we are now in our 10th year of offering values-based leadership support to Australian state, territory, and federal MPs. And this is the work that birthed our newer bespoke program, Improving Democracy, Transforming Parliament for Women, which started in 2022. And these programs are all about supporting MPs to restore trust in government. And a key tenet of these programs, particularly our Transforming Parliament for Women program, is compassion for self and compassion for others. So our programs are about transforming self to transform system. And in our programs, we build a safe container for MPs to come together across party lines and reconnect with their values and their vision for entering politics in the first place, and to work on transforming the system with the support of their colleagues across party lines. So, of course, we want to have a robust debate in our parliaments and in our democracy, but we want it to be about the things that really matter and not about attacking or tearing down individuals in a way that, one, is just providing media fodder and a distraction from the really complex challenges we face, and 2, would be unacceptable in any other contemporary workplace. But the institution of politics, the system of it, as Jennifer mentioned, it's very resilient. And so what we hear from a lot of MPs who join our programs is that they're so deeply dissatisfied with the system that they operate in, and they want to work in a constructive, values-based way, but they feel constrained by that system, or really, systems within systems that they operate in. So that's why, off the back of, we had the Federal Jenkins report and the New South Wales Broderick report, and I feel that most of Australian parliaments have had some kind of review into toxic workplace cultures. We worked with 4 New South Wales MPs, so 1 Labor, 1 Liberal, 1 Green, and 1 Independent, to co-create this initiative, Transforming Parliament for Women. We now have over 30% of women in New South Wales Parliament as alumni of the program. So women from right across the political spectrum working together to transform New South Wales Parliament for the participation and flourishing of women. And this year we expanded the program nationwide, bringing together women across all 3 levels of Parliament, and from, I think we had 4 states, 2 territories involved in that nationwide program. So we meet with the women who've taken part in these programs at regular intervals, and we provide a safe space and process for them to work through prototypes that they've co-designed, various ways to transform Parliament, but most importantly, it's their relationships that have been transformed, and that's already had an incredible effect on the experience of Parliament for these women. And, the theory of change for this is that in creating a place where women can flourish in Parliament, it's going to be a place where everybody can flourish. So in some of our check-ins, I've heard incredible insights into how women have worked together on really contested legislation across party lines, and were able to be positive and productive in a way that worked for both of them and their parties. And they say if they hadn't built the relationships or had the shared experience of the program, it would never have happened that way. So this is a highly ideologically divided community with competing priorities coming together to constructively discuss and make progress on a collective purpose. And they do that in a compassionate way because they've co-designed a space that allows them to be compassionate with themselves first and then with others. And just one last thing before I finish up, but we have so many participants who comment on how after the course, they now see people they previously regarded just as enemies, as humans, and humans that they deeply understand. And this really sets a new basis for the way they interact, even when they are in strong opposition about something ideological or policy-based. And I think it's that seeing humanity that's such a key part of creating conditions for compassion. Thanks, Janet.
Thanks very much, Chloe. And I'm now going to turn to Kate, now Kate, you're the independent member for Curtin in Perth, and congratulations on your re-election for a second term. That's really good. But before your life in Parliament, you had a background in law, business, professional services and the community sector. And I know that you've had a long interest in improving public discourse because I first met you at a Next 25 workshop that Chloe and others were running some years ago before you even were elected to Parliament for the first time. And during your first term, you championed evidence-based policy based on reason debate. And you also were known to say that compassion was one of the characteristics that drove your initial campaign, and it's something that gives you great optimism. So the 48th Parliament's up and running. It's got a different composition to the previous Parliament, including many more women, many of whom are new to the job. Are you still optimistic? And reflecting on what Jennifer and Chloe have said, what are the opportunities for compassion and kindness to improve this Parliament going forward?
Thank you, Janet. I feel like you've stolen all my lines.
Oh, sorry.
Not at all. Yeah, so I went into the last Parliament as in a group of women who were not part of the party system and were put up by the communities, and that's been really interesting. And I think in that context, the government had a narrow margin. I think it was the first time 8 women had been sworn into Parliament altogether at the same time, and it was a pretty powerful moment. We did have the ability to call out some of the bad behaviour and worked with the Speaker quite a lot on trying to improve question time. The first day when I sat in question time, I'd never watched an entire question time on telly even, and I had no idea it was going to be like that. So I was completely shocked and pretty quickly started working to improve it. Got the crossbench on both sides to come together and say what improvements could we make, and put submissions to the Manager of Government Business and Opposition Business and the Speaker and the Procedure Committee. Did we make any? I mean, I heard from both sides things have been better since you guys have been here, because we were calling out the behaviour, but also recognising that it needs to be a place for robust debate, but robust, respectful debate. So I and other crossbenchers really tried to change that by example, and it's hard to change a culture. And I think doing that by example has got to be part of the solution. Another thing that was different in that Parliament was the crossbench, an expanded crossbench, was actually focused on trying to improve the laws, not make the government fail. So it's different to an opposition role. And we actually, wanted the government to make better laws, and so we're acting constructively. The crossbench successfully amended 20 bills in the last Parliament, and the opposition, I think, amended 1 bill. So we were able to have that change. Personally, it was all about building relationships, and as you say, bringing the humanity back. And I live with Allegra Spender and Monique Ryan, and we invited people over for dinner once a week from across the political spectrum to get to know them as humans who are sharing a similar weird job rather than where they came from ideologically. And I think that really helped to try and retain some humanity in that space. It was a pretty brutal election. I think it's a really hard process to go through, and I could tell you lots of dreadful stories about it. This Parliament the things that, I mean, there is a better gender balance, so that's great. There have been a few changes made to the crossbench. In some ways, because the government has a bigger majority, I think it may be harder for the crossbench to exert pressure on things like question time reform. But on the flip side, if you're optimistic, you might say maybe the government will feel braver about doing some things. So we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be, I mean, truth in political advertising has been a big priority for me. Zali Steggall had done some work on it. I introduced 2 bills that contained a truth model. And the government did, in fact, introduce a bill, but it wasn't debated in that parliament. So that will be a big priority, because I think that has a big impact on civility of debate. We will keep chipping away on keeping it compassionate and civil, and working with the Speaker on how we make improvements.
Oh.
Kate, you've muted yourself.
No, I did.
Oh, someone has.
There you go.
Did you mute me on purpose?
No, no.
Have you had enough?
No. I was trying to mute other people.
I'll take that as a wind-up signal.
Yeah.
But one thing I think will be interesting is with a female opposition leader, we'll see how that changes the tone. Hopefully it makes it more civil, but I also am concerned that that might be weaponised, and I don't want to, things to be attributed to gender when they're not about that, they're about something else. So that's something that I'm nervous about. I think we should have civil debate for everyone, not just women, and it's not always about gender. So really we're focusing on improving the quality of the debate and the level of civility for everyone. I might stop there and have to expand on anything as we progress.
Yeah. Okay. I might just quickly, I want to sort of come back to a few of those points, come back to Jennifer about some of the things that she's been doing. But I just might quickly ask Chloë to just pick up on that point about gender and why, the reason that you thought it was important to work with the women in Parliament in your programme.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a very particular sort of a theory of change with our program. So it began with leadership, which is, as I mentioned, open to men and women, federal, state and territory MPs. And it starts with values-based leadership. But as part of that program to support them and network them across party lines, we do introduce systems thinking and systems mapping and get them to think about, a lot of them comment on not feeling a lot of agency in the ability to transform the system, which, as I mentioned, is really resilient and has a power sort of bigger than the sum of its parts. And so we get them to think about, well, within that system, what might you like to change? Or what's something you're passionate about that you've seen that you could work on that isn't ideological, that you could work with people across party lines? And that is how this program emerged. So it was for women, all alumna of leadership. So they met through that program. They did that program with men. And it was probably 3 to 4 years after they'd done the initial program that they came back to Next 25 and said, we've kept in touch. We have this community. All of us have been experienced really challenging workplaces in Parliament as women. Very different challenges they all had, and they had a difference of opinion on what the root issue was or what the biggest challenge was. But they shared that they knew the New South Wales election was coming up. They anticipated a lot more women would be coming into Parliament, and they wanted to improve. They thought they could improve the entire experience of Parliament if they could improve for women. So it was more like a lever or a way to unlock progress in Parliament. And in the co-design process, which went over about probably about 6 months with those 4 women, we explored not naming the program anything about women or having it be everyone in Parliament, so including parliamentary staff as well. And it was really through their guidance and a bit of testing and thinking that they thought, just because of issues with trust and their knowledge of New South Wales Parliament, they felt starting just with women MPs was the best starting place to get them in a room together and have them start building connection and compassion for each other. So it's just about, for us, I suppose, that finding the lever for change.
Thanks, Chloë. So I might come back now to Jennifer and ask you, Jennifer, please, to tell us a little bit more about some of the things that you've been doing. You've mentioned before about you've got a civility pledge, you're doing some work on modernising the Parliament, and some other things that you've been doing with your Compassion in Politics group in the UK. So.
Yeah, wonderful. And it's so lovely to hear about everyone else's work. And we're very aligned with what Chloë does. And we provide training in the Palace of Westminster as well to try and improve the capacity, because essentially people in that environment are largely in a fight or flight state, which means physiologically you can't even access the nuanced part of your brain, which is capable of cooperation and collaboration and nuanced thinking. And we also convene a group of women because, especially right now in the UK Parliament, we have 200 new members, and meeting and speaking to them, that they've come in and they've gone, what on earth is this? I cannot believe it. You know, we have got an archaic patriarchal system that was founded on the idea that women shouldn't have power, and indeed anyone who wasn't a member of the aristocracy shouldn't have power. And it's been reformed on a piecemeal basis to try and provide democracy. And obviously, we are very grateful to have democracy given what's happening in the world, but the way we do democracy is not fit for purpose. And I love the fact that Kate talked about question time. You know, one of the things that we're trying to do is get rid of that form of question time. I had a really lively argument with a government minister who said to me, well, you know, that's how I test ideas. You know, if we didn't have this rowdy debate at question time, I wouldn't know how people felt. And I said, well, if it's such an effective mechanism, then why doesn't every multinational and every other organization have a debating chamber instead of a boardroom? So, and I also think it feeds into public perception. You know, how are we perceived you know, I have so much respect for people like Kate who take public office, especially women, and even more women of colour in the current environment. It's dangerous. It's absolutely dangerous. And many of the MPs we work with, over 100 MPs now, experience violence, threats of violence to their family, to their teams. And we know politicians who have been too scared to say their truth on the floor of the House for fear of what might happen to those that they love. And that is not a functional democracy. But if we want to change the culture, it can start with how the leaders speak to each other. And I'll just speak for the UK Parliament, although I know that there are many parallels. You know, having people shouting, jeering, booing, name calling, laughing, harassing is not the best look for the rest of the public, and our polling shows that there's a lot of disrespect because of that. So some of our work is the easy wins. You know, how do we change the easy wins in how politics is done? But it's also, how do we have that revolution? The parliamentary authorities want to change, but are actually completely resistant to change. So for those who want change, we have to go about it in different ways. And we work very similarly. I love what Chloe's doing, and gather together those MPs who want change. And we have launched something called the Civility Pledge, which was signed by 100 members of Parliament, which is just essentially saying, however you're going to behave, this is how I'm going to behave. And our research shows that those who took that pledge had a different experience, because when you let go of the rope in a tug of war, the other side falls over. So you can begin individually and collectively as individuals to make that change. And just the final thing I wanted to mention was that we work with the campaign to reform political advertising in the UK, and their goal of trying to prevent misrepresentation in political advertising. But we also think we need to go further, and we have a piece of legislation which has just been adopted by the Welsh Parliament, which would create an offence of deliberate political deception. We're not talking here about mistakes or rhetorical flourishes. We're talking about the deliberate deception that is knowingly enacted on the electorate. And of course, in the UK, we had Brexit, which was based on a lot of disinformation that was known to be disinformation. And yet the politicians responsible then took office and carried on. And we see in America what happens when someone who knowingly lies to achieve electoral advantage is then able to profit from it. So this is a measure we'd like to see adopted globally, and we're working in as many countries as are interested, because there's a very limited time to protect our democracies. We're watching the disintegration in America, and all of us have to look now to how we can put the right guardrails in place.
Thanks, Jennifer. So I think, Shelley, can you maybe just put us all on spotlight now? Because we're going to have a bit of a chat now, I think. Just put all four of us on spotlight, yeah. So I want to go back to Kate, though, first. Can we have Kate on the spotlight as well? Thank you. Yeah, there seems to be two aspects to this compassion. One is the way that, you know, the members of parliament interact with each other, the civility that Jennifer just been talking about. Be having trouble with mute. Thank you. The civility that Jennifer's mentioned and that Kate's already mentioned about question time and all of that, we know it's a very sort of adversarial space. So there's this sort of work to do to improve that. And then there's also the compassion and kindness that you might actually bring to policy. And it does freeing up one area of civility and compassion sort of lead to improvements in the other. So, Kate, I wanted to sort of turn to you to maybe respond to Jennifer's comments about the sorts of things she's doing in the UK, and then maybe we can deepen into how this actually impacts on the policies that are being made.
Yeah, I mean, I, as you say, both are necessary, and I suppose, I mean, I think that I certainly looked Jacinta Ardern and you know, and found her to be a breath of fresh air back when she was in power, and thought, wow, you can actually you can give people a hug, you can be human and be a leader. And I think you need to see that in order to be able to do it. And so that has been really important to me in how we talk about issues, is come from a place of compassion and recognise that actually it shouldn't be cringy to talk about kindness. You know, that compassion and kindness, these are human values, and it's weird that we don't talk about them very much in politics. So I think having more, and obviously women aren't the only ones who have compassion. I do think having more women in Parliament does change the nature of some of those policy conversations in a positive way. And so that, you know, that's really important. The behaviour in the chamber and the way Parliament works is probably a smaller issue than the fact that we need compassion in our policies, but one is likely to lead to the other. And certainly, I know Zoe Stegel has worked on a pledge about parliamentary behaviour and telling the truth. But there are other ways, and we do now have an independent parliamentary standards commission. There has been work done since the Parliamentary Workplace Support Service Act in 2023. I'd say there's still work to be done on that, but there has been some progress in the last Parliament.
Thank you. Chloe, do you want to add some thoughts to that?
Yeah, well, I guess part of our work believes in a portfolio response. So I think, you know, it's important to have sort of structural change. And I love, I met with Jennifer last year when she came out to Australia, and I loved hearing about what they've done in Welsh Parliament. And I think there's so much potential to be introduced in Australian Parliament. I would be a big advocate for that. And I think it's also important to have many different ways of creating spaces for people to come together and discuss things, because I think even sometimes without meaning to, people get excluded from certain spaces or aren't comfortable. As I said, there's a lot, well, we know there's a lot of lack of trust in politics. So I feel like we've got to keep filling out new spaces and new ways to connect with people, because people I think trust is easily tested. But I do think it is a portfolio response. And back to, you know, the nature of our work, which is about thinking of it as a system, I think there's also a lot of work to be done on behalf of the public. and on behalf of our media in this conversation, because they all feed each other. And I think when we talk about, oh, we want to see more compassion and kindness from politicians, well, I think the public needs to also consider their compassion and kindness for politicians. And it's a bit of a sport in Australia to be really tough. And I think that's okay. I mean, politicians are in public office and they need to be held to account. But there's definitely a line. And I think a lot of the way we talk about politicians or what we expect is really unhelpful. I think people are largely unaware of the pressures and reality of a life for a politician. And when I just have so much respect for all the politicians that I've met and who have gone through our programs. And at the end, I always say, gosh, it would not be possible, but I wish the public could be there and experience and see what I see and hear in those programs, because I think they'd feel very differently and want to support change rather than just going for the gotcha moments and sinking the teeth in and feeling a sense of glee about those moments. And yeah, I do think also the media has a lot to answer for. There's definitely a incentives and rewards relationship there between politics and the media, but I think that that's a lever for change as well. So many people look to, and it might not be traditional media, it might be new media, but they look there to understand the system and understand, their identity or their group and how they might respond. And I think some more constructive media is a big part of that picture as well.
Yeah, thanks, Chloe. And one of the things that seems to be a bit interrelated to this idea of compassion in relation to the actual types of policies and the type of thinking that might happen when people are sort of a bit more connected in a more relational way is to bring more longer term thinking into politics. And that's something I know that you've done some work on, again, in the UK, Jennifer, around well-being of future generations. Do you want to, and we've got something happening in the Australian Parliament about that as well. Do you want to just say something about that relationship between the compassion work and getting longer term thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that's the real challenge, because things like climate require long-term thinking, and they also require really unpopular decisions, things that won't be immediately popular. They will ultimately create a more connected, resilient society, but they're going to require that we don't always have what we want when we want it. And at the moment, it's being weaponized. So the Welsh government, again, is leading the way. They've introduced a Wellbeing of Future Generations Act, and we work to try and bring that into the UK Parliament, because it feels that one of the levers of change is that if we can ensure that legislation that is passed has to do two things. First of all, it has to respect what is needed to address climate and the next generation, and it also has to respect what is needed to protect the needs of the most vulnerable. So in the UK, the government for this one, and this one unfortunately has continued it, introduced measures that would push children into large-scale poverty and has actually caused people to die. They wanted to please the far right, so they wanted to introduce benefits. They started benefit cuts. They started to reframe how those who fall upon hard times are seen, so that they became other, they became the enemy. And then the feckless single mothers were having too many babies, so they started to cut the benefits that women could receive. And that just creates more wedge, more division. So we want to introduce a mechanism that would say, before you pass a law, we have to see what the impact would be on the most vulnerable. And if it's going to push people into destitution and children into hunger, you've got to find another way of achieving your political aims. You're sovereign, but you can't do it at the expense of the lives of others.
Thank you. Now, Shelley, I've had a request in the chat here from Kim Rubenstein in Canberra here if she could ask a question live. And Kim is somebody who's been very involved in some of this work here in Australia. So I might just kick off the Q&A. I might go to Kim. If you can put your video on.
Can you see me? I've put my video. I think I have. It's just that
Yes, there you are.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Oh, that's good. I think Kate and Chloe I've met before, but Jennifer I haven't. And Jennifer, I'm curious to ask you about some of the work that's been done in Wales and the UK about job sharing in Parliament, something that I've been involved with here that each of Chloe and Kate know about. In terms of some of those points that you made earlier, and Chloe just mentioned about structures of Parliament that are not necessarily so conducive to good decision making, and the initiatives that started in Wales and the UK in relation to looking at job sharing as one of the many ways in which we could not only diversify the range of people who would be in a more likely position to consider running, but also the impact of job sharing in terms of modelling different modes of power and the exercise of power. So have you been doing any work in that area, Jennifer?
Yes, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more that it's essential. And we had a legal case in the UK maybe 7-8 years ago.
2015, yes, I've written about it, yes.
Yeah, amazing. That was a colleague of mine who took that case. And it's one of we have a modernisation committee in the UK Parliament that has said it wants to modernise politics, and that is one of the clear ways it can do it. The other way is electronic voting during the COVID pandemic. We had electronic voting and it worked very well. The argument that's posed in Westminster against electronic voting, which would again enable people with caring responsibilities not to spend so much time away from home and also be able to spend more time working with their constituents, was that, well, the only time we get to see ministers is in the voting lobby. And that again is preposterous, because if the only way you can grab a minister, and I understand the importance and I understand, the need to have access to ministers is in a lobby. And Caroline Lucas, who was the first Green MP, calculated the length of time that people stand in lobby queues, MPs stand in lobby queues, and it ended up being a week of their parliamentary life. And similarly, the way speakers are called upon in Parliament. I spoke to one woman MP last week who said she'd had to spend 7 hours on the floor of the House to try and get the Speaker's attention to make a 2-minute intervention, and she couldn't go to the loo in that time. So we've made a whole raft of proposals, which I'll share with you all afterwards, about how we talk about feminizing politics. That's one lens. We could be talking about making it more functional, more fit for purpose. We could be talking about, we can use all sorts of frames, but it's essentially the same thing, is that we need Parliament to be fit for purpose and to be genuinely inclusive. And it is not. There are so many barriers for women who are in the political space, certainly in the UK, that make it very difficult if you have any responsibilities outside of Parliament. And most of the women I speak to said it would be fine so long as I have a wife, but they don't. So that's definitely an issue. And thank you for the work that you're doing, and I'd love to know more about it.
I'll get in touch with you afterwards to share some of it. Thanks so much. Really, it's been a great session for all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. So are we picking up any other questions, some other questions? Shelley, do you want to put yourself on?
Yes, I've got a couple.
Yeah.
One from Jenny. Some women in Parliament, when marked on compassion and kindness, would get a room for improvement comment. What do you do about them?
Maybe Kate would like to take that one up.
I think you could say the same of women or men. People have different levels of compassion, and they're a product of their environment and their history. And I think by championing it, by showing that it is possible, you're not going to change everyone. But I do think that you create cultural change in a different standard by showing it. And I've had people say to me from the backbench or staffers especially, saying, oh, since you guys have been around, people watch themselves a bit because they know that they'll get called out if they cross the line. And I think it's got to be a bit of carrot and a bit of stick, but certainly it helps if you've got a Prime Minister who's talks about kindness. That also needs to be carried through. But you're never going to fix everyone, and you have to have a combination of championing it, but also there being consequences if people really cross the line.
Yeah.
I think it's also, how do women succeed in a very patriarchal male environment? Unfortunately, sometimes sometimes we, in order to succeed, we may adopt strategies and tactics that we've seen as successful, and they became embedded. Certainly, when I started out my career, I was a journalist in a very, very male world, and the only way I'd get my story on is if I out machoed the men. And luckily, I've learned as I've matured how to hold my power in a different way. But I think, absolutely, it takes all types to become a politician, but I think the environment doesn't help, and the ways in which people are perceived and do succeed doesn't help.
Can I just add, it is worth pointing out, I think, that my experience as a crossbencher is probably quite different to if you're in a party. I mean, I'm there surrounded by colleagues who are similarly, strong women. There's no one who we answer to, really. And so I think if you're in a party system, maybe those power imbalances or, it's very different. I don't feel like it's a difficult place for me to be as a woman. I think that there are cultural things that are hangovers from its long history as a patriarchal society or environment that need improving. But I don't want to give the impression that being a woman, certainly on the crossbench for me at the moment, is difficult by virtue of me being a woman. I've had quite a positive experience and surrounded by strong women. It's not all bad.
I might just jump in there on behalf of the Women's Climate Congress, because one of the things that we try to do is to create a space for women to come together to really explore their own agenda, because embedded in that system, which is patriarchal, and however it's behaving now, the policies and the agenda, if you like, the whole agenda that goes with economics and everything else, is something that has developed historically with a patriarchal lens. And we'd like to give women the opportunity to really explore their own lens. And that's partly why we also advocate for it. Well, is why we advocate for a multi-party women's caucus, to give, not to ask the women to come into that caucus to give up their party political sort of affiliations, but to allow them to come together to bring their shared experience of being a woman into the agenda as well. And
I just wanted to pick up on what Kate said, because despite all these problems, I don't know a single woman politician who wouldn't want to be there, who wouldn't want to be doing what they're doing. And so it isn't that it isn't an incredibly rewarding job, but certainly within political parties in the UK system, the whipping is so harsh, and the ostracization and the punishment so cruel if you don't toe the party line, that creates all sorts of extra issues.
Chloe, do you want to comment on this?
I guess just that in many conversations I've had, and particularly with women in New South Wales Parliament, I think there's a conversation or a view working within how Parliament currently works. And I have had lots of conversations with women, some of whom have said, similar to Kate, that they've felt that being a woman hasn't been a particular disadvantage or meant anything for them. And then I've had conversations with women who feel definitely that being a woman has been particularly tough, but often they're still talking within understanding the way the Parliament works now. So I think there's just a sense of possibility that sometimes is missing. Like I've had lots of conversations where people say, "Oh, but it's fine. I've got all the skills to withstand it." And I think, well, I believe you, and I'm impressed by those skills, because I don't think it's easy. But what if you didn't need that? Like, what's the possibility if we didn't need to go in with that kind of armor on? And I guess back to what Jennifer was saying about the sort of cognitive state, or whether you're able to entertain collaboration or tap into anything more generative, or tap into, flow of ideas when you're in a state of flight, fight, freeze. So I do think part of it is about positing some possibility of what we could imagine it could be, not just thinking, "Oh, can we survive in the way it works now?"
I'm a bit. So, Shelley, is there another question that
We've just had one come in that I think follows on. If our current model of politics is not as effective as it can be, and its foundations are built on principles that support adversarial and argumentative tendencies and systems,
Oh,
that is already broken.
we lost a little bit of that. Can you just read out the last sentence again? The last little
Yep.
bit.
Yeah, then how can we change the foundation so that we are not building on something that is already broken?
Maybe that's something for you, Jennifer, with your parliamentary reforms, 21st century parliament work.
I think the things we're talking about, manners of discourse, and also I remember one teacher saying to me, it's really simple. We say to our children, use inside voices in the classroom and outside voices in the schoolyard. So just really simple things like that. And, having positive role models and examples, as Kate said, is really important. But a lot of the work that politicians do is collaborative at committee stage. You're working away from cameras, and that isn't really shown. So it's promoting that kind of way of working over the Punch and Judy show, the bear pit of gladiatorial showmanship. And one of the other arguments I've heard for keeping that very adversarial structure is that no one would watch us on television without it, if that's the only thing that interests them. And really, it isn't the purpose of politics to provide entertainment, but some very senior members of parliament have used that argument with me. And so I also think that the party structure is really damaging. The whipping system, the whip's office actually has a physical whip in it, which was where the term came from. How do we get party loyalty? We use a system of bribery and threat to get politicians to do what they don't want to do. We see that on an extreme scale in America, but in the UK as well. If they want an MP to support them in extremis, they will. In fact, we've had 10 MPs rejected, thrown out of the party for not voting against reforming that child benefit that I mentioned.
Jennifer, in Australia, it's worth noting, in Australia, if you don't vote along party lines and you're a member of the Labor Party, you get kicked out of the Labor Party. It's not allowed. In the Liberal Party, it's theoretically allowed, but there's only one person who crossed the floor in the last parliament, and she is not in this parliament. So it's much more overt here than it is in the UK, that it's actually just not allowed.
Yeah.
And then you have a situation where people are obliged to follow party. And I made this programme that you mentioned, Janet, for the BBC, following a survey which we're actually doing with Australian politicians right now on the impact on mental health of this environment and the moral injury of having to vote in ways that you don't believe, that you weren't elected to represent, is very high, as is the sense of disempowerment. If you are on the backbenches in a party with a big majority, it's very difficult to do anything. And many of them talk about the despair they felt, having arrived finally in Parliament, maybe having worked in local government where they had much more real agency over the nitty-gritty of people's lives, to arrive in a Parliament where they were just there to rubber stamp policies that they didn't necessarily agree with. And then, of course, if you want to get into the place where you can shape the policies into ministerial position, you can't rebel. So you have to behave. So there's a built-in disincentive against speaking your truth. And that has a mental impact as well as an impact on the outcome.
Thank you. Now we're getting alarmingly close to their time, and I'm going to just ask everyone online if they would mind if we just overrun by about 2 minutes, because I just want to, we've got all these people online here, and the Women's Climate, many of them are members of the Women's Climate Congress or followers of us, and are very keen to know what we can do to help this situation. Jennifer, I know that you're hoping to start, or you are going to launch national politics in Australia. What can we do? How can we help?
Oh, thank you. I'm posting in the link now. Well, I hope I am. Shelley can help me because I'm not very computer literate. I'm going to post a link which has our membership sign up page. Yeah. And anyone who wants to get involved, send us an email and please sign up. We will be launching hopefully within the next few months. We've had some positive engagement with members of Parliament who would support and endorse it, and we're really excited. And we'll look forward to working with every other organisation like the Women's Climate Congress, like Next 25. It's all about collaboration. It is all about how can we support the amazing work that's being done, and together move forward to make what we know is possible happen.
Thank you. And that's great. So, and you want sort of interested organisations and interested people to sign up so that you're building a network of people that are really sort of take this.
And Jennifer, it would be great if you and I could have a follow-up conversation.
I would love that. Thank you.
That's great. Tick. And Chloe, what can we do to help your work in the Parliament with the women? Yeah,
well, one of the biggest barriers for our work is the support for professional development or access to these programs in Parliament. So we're really lucky. We worked with alumnus of our program to create the Skills Development Allowance and the Skills Development Program in New South Wales Parliament, which means there's actually a budget line item to undertake professional development for MPs. But in most parliaments, there isn't that. And there's various parliaments who have different rules about how people can use their allowances for training, but a lot of people pay for it out of their own pocket, and we are philanthropically funded. So this work is highly subsidised by philanthropy. So I think there's two barriers. One is financial and one is the stigma attached to getting this kind of support and joining programs like ours and like others. So I think advocating for MPs to join the programs, we have a nominate an MP where on our website, and I think Shelley has the link to share. So please nominate people to take part in the programs and build that public awareness. This benefits everyone when MPs have access to this support and financial help to do it as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I just would really like to thank all of our guest conversationalists tonight. We like to call you conversationalists because it sounds more sort of inclusive than speakers and panelists and things like that. Yeah, thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Can I just quickly say, Janet, it is so important to have organisations like Compassion in Politics and Next 25 doing this work. When you're in Parliament, you've got limited time and you have to build on the ideas that are out there. Yeah. So I'm really, really grateful to the work that and Women's Climate Congress does as well. It matters and it's appreciated.
We'll see if we can really make it count in this next Parliament. So thank you, everybody. So we'll give our speakers a lovely round of applause, and I just might put you back onto gallery view so I can see everyone for a minute. So thank you. So just to conclude, thanks to the speakers, obviously, and I'm pleased to visit our website. Shelley's putting the links in the chat. You can join the Women's Climate Congress. It's free to join, and that will get you on our mailing list and involved in our different activities. We'd love to have you. When you're on our website, check out the reports page for our recent Victorian Congress, National Congress it was actually, but it was held in Victoria in Castlemaine. There's some wonderful reports there of sessions and just that whole energy that was created by the women from very many different walks of life that came to that conference. And also, we've just launched our end of financial year donations campaign. And as Chloe's just mentioned, this is a really big issue for us to fund the work that we're doing. And we've framed that this year a little bit around a new outreach program that we want to start to rural and regional women to really bring them into this conversation. So do visit that part of our website as well. And thank you all for joining and for giving up your time on a Thursday evening. And we look forward to seeing you again at the next time we have one of these conversations. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.